Happy NFL Draft Day. And on today's edition of Locked On LSU, I'm going to break down what I think are the three best NFL fits for Jayden Daniels.
You are Locked On LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, what's up, y'all? Welcome into Locked On LSU. Thank you for making us your first listen every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. You can find us on your preferred podcast platform. And of course, you can always find us on YouTube as well. So hit that subscribe button, rate, comment, all of that great stuff. Always appreciate you for making Locked On LSU your first listen every single day. And always appreciate you interacting with podcasts. Love hearing what you guys have to say. But happy draft day. I know that if you're, an NFL fan, I cover an NFL team in the market that I do radio in, and I'm ready for it. Once we've gotten to the 2-month point of talking about the draft and breaking down potential draft picks where we find ourselves now, we're ready for it. Give me some action. I want to see the kind of madness and craziness that unravels tonight. And I want to see what was all smokescreen and all a big fat lie all along. So I know that we are all ready for the NFL draft. And it's one of my favorite days of the year, honestly, because it's the fusion of two things that I love so much, the NFL and college football. So, and it's especially special, I think, for all of us as LSU fans tonight, because there will be so much LSU buzz and so many familiar LSU faces walk across the stage tonight. Of course, Jayden Daniels, a consensus top 3 pick. Of course, Malik Nabers will most likely be a top 10 pick. Brian Thomas's stock has been skyrocketing. I expect him to be off the board no later than 20, even before then. So it's going to be a blast, and it's going to be really fun to see so many players that we recognize and love at LSU, and just as college football as a whole, be able to see their dreams come true. So let's get into it. What I think are the 3 best fits for Jayden Daniels at the next level. Now, of course, what we know about the draft is if you're picking high in the draft, you're probably not very good. I mean, I think Chicago is in a position where were they very good last year? No, they weren't. But they also traded that pick. I guess traded into that pick last year whenever they traded out of number 1 with the Carolina Panthers, and the Panthers gave Chicago their number 1 pick this upcoming season. So Chicago, yeah, they have the number 1 overall pick, but they weren't the worst team in the league last year. Washington, on the other hand, no, that's their pick because they were just that bad. That's how bad Washington was. But weirdly enough, I think Washington is one of the best fits for Jayden Daniels at the next level for a couple of reasons. But the biggest reason is because of Cliff Kingsbury. Cliff Kingsbury is now the Washington Commanders offensive coordinator. Look at the list of quarterbacks that Cliff Kingsbury has worked with in the past. Patrick Mahomes at Texas Tech, Kyler Murray in Arizona, most recently Caleb Williams at USC. He was the quarterbacks coach. Cliff Kingsbury was this past year at USC. All of those quarterbacks have very similar skill sets to Jayden Daniels, and that they're mobile, but not just mobile and that they can escape pressure, but that is a strategic part of your game plan. That I think a lot of offensive coordinators or just coaches in general might not know what to do with the scramble ability of some quarterbacks, might not be as comfortable as other coaches in off-platform throws and unscripted plays. But that's really where Jayden Daniels thrives. And that's what we saw so much last year with Caleb Williams is really Caleb Williams was at his best when he was under pressure. I think you could say the same thing about Jayden Daniels as well. Is that when Jayden Daniels had time, he could deliver an absolute beauty of a pass. But when he didn't have time, when he was under pressure, he could still make those plays, those off-platform, those, completely improvising kind of plays. Cliff Kingsbury is the kind of coach. I'll even add Johnny Manziel into the mix as well. Don't forget, Cliff Kingsbury was the offensive coordinator at Texas A&M when Johnny Manziel had his big 2012 season at Texas A&M. So Cliff Kingsbury has a very long and rather successful history of quarterbacks that have a very similar skill set as Jayden Daniels. I think that Cliff Kingsbury would be salivating at the opportunity to work with a talent like Jayden Daniels, and I also think it would work great with Jayden Daniels. Now, the few things that give me pause and give me concern is a big reason why quarterbacks at the next level are quote unquote busts is because they're drafted into unstable situations. That they're drafted into situations where they have to be the savior, but there's really no infrastructure in place for a young quarterback to thrive. I think that the best example of that is probably Baker Mayfield. He was drafted as he was supposed to be the savior in Cleveland, but he had several different offensive coordinators and it was a revolving door at head coach. And yeah, he had Jarvis Landry and Odell Beckham Jr. on what year was that? 2019, whatever year that was. Like he had weapons to throw to, but Cleveland was a bleep show. It was a bleep storm when Baker Mayfield was drafted there. There was no way that any rookie quarterback could have thrived in that environment. Now, fast forward to now, he's the sort of quarterback of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and got Tampa Bay to the divisional round of the playoffs. So keep that in mind as well. That I think we're really quick to judge young quarterbacks. Bryce Young is probably a great example of that. We're really quick to judge Bryce Young in Carolina. But can you imagine any quarterback in that situation? When your best when your best weapon in the pass game is Adam Thielen and you have an absolute crap offensive line? So, I think we have to keep that in mind that young quarterbacks they need infrastructure in place. Does Washington have that? Washington had one of the worst offensive lines in the National Football League this past season. Really, your best weapon would be Terry McLaurin in the pass game. Terry McLaurin's not a bad receiver in the slightest, but I don't think any of us view Terry McLaurin as a top 10 wide receiver in the National Football League. So while I think that Cliff Kingsbury would be a great match for Jayden Daniels, and Cliff Kingsbury would allow Jayden Daniels to do what he does best, to be able to allow him to thrive and really be the kind of quarterback that he grew into in his second year at LSU. I do fear about the weapons and the pieces around Jayden Daniels if he does end up getting drafted in Washington. Now, but one thing though, like Vegas is going crazy for Jayden Daniels to be the second overall pick. That I think a couple days ago it was at like plus 250. Now it's minus 500. Jayden Daniels to Washington. So overwhelming odds. Jayden Daniels to Washington. I think that is the most likely pick there. And I also think it's a pretty good fit with the offensive coordinator. I'll continue with what I think are the best fits for Jayden Daniels, and we'll continue that conversation after just a few words from our sponsors. Okay, so I have been told that I have a competitive side, and I get it. I understand. I admit it. I do have a competitive side, but we all do, right? But my competitive side is a huge fan of Monopoly Go. I'm sure that you've heard of it. It's been downloaded over 150 million times. And it's such a great twist on the original Monopoly, but you can play on not one but hundreds of Monopoly boards in crazy locations. You can build up amazing cities that bring you big money. The best part, I think, though, is messing with my friends. I can charge them rent on iconic properties just like the classic Monopoly, but now I can also heist their vaults of riches for myself. And the leaderboards show me who the biggest Monopoly tycoon is, which really feeds into my competitive side. But it is not just my competitive side that loves it. You can also team up with friends and people all around the world in timed tournaments to earn huge rewards. So get in on the action, get in on the game, and join your friends. Download Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store or Google Play. Again, Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store or Google Play. All right, I also want to tell you about Gametime. So, Gametime is now an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets even faster and easier for Major League Baseball games. Prices on the Gametime app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. So, I was in Atlanta a couple weeks ago for a wedding and wanted to go to a Braves game. It was Braves opening day. And I thought, how in the world are we going to find tickets? I mean, it's the Braves, it's opening night, it's a beautiful night. I thought, don't worry about it. I'll check Gametime. And of course, Gametime had wonderful seats, great tickets, and it was the easiest process of getting the tickets. All I did was press a couple of buttons and then boom, the ticket was in my wallet and it was easy, it was seamless, and I knew that I was getting the best price. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE, for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, rolling along here, locked on LSU. Thank you for making us your first listen every single day. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? And do you have to turn down the volume with all of that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today. It's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. All right. NFL draft is tonight. The best fits what I think are the best fits rather for Jayden Daniels at the next level. First and foremost, it's Washington. I think that's most likely. Honestly, I'd be willing to put a little bit of money down on Jayden Daniels being a Washington Commander next season. But we all know weird things happen in the NFL draft. That we can crunch numbers and we can watch the tape and we can read as many articles and breakdowns as we possibly can. We can talk to as many coaches and scouts as we possibly can throughout this process. But there are just certain things that you cannot predict. Like last season, there was so much buzz about Will Levis being even the number one overall pick. Everyone thought Will Levis was a shoo-in to be a top 10 pick. He fell to the second round. Weird things happen all the time. So while these next two teams are unlikely, never say never. Never say never to a trade up. Never say never to a player potentially falling. It's the NFL draft, okay? Like nobody can predict it. People make millions and millions of dollars to do it, and even they can't do it. So the second team that I think is could be a really good fit for Jayden Daniels, and is a quarterback needy team, is the Minnesota Vikings. And I know that all of you Saints fans out there are probably moaning and groaning and rolling your eyes at that. But I think Minnesota is a great position for any young quarterback to be in. For one reason, it's an offensive minded head coach and Kevin O'Connell. And you could say to yourself, well, Kevin O'Connell maybe comes from that Sean McVay system, and that Sean McVay system traditionally it's more pro style quarterbacks, like we saw with Jared Goff, like we saw with Matthew Stafford, like we've seen with Kevin O'Connell and Kirk Cousins over the last few years in Minnesota. That the profiles of those quarterbacks don't necessarily compare to the profile of Jayden Daniels, who is much more mobile, who is much more air it out, much more less dink and dunk, so to speak. But Kevin O'Connell has a very long resume of working with a lot of different types of quarterbacks. He spent a lot of time in Washington where he worked with Alex Smith, who has a different profile. Dwayne Haskins, may he rest in peace, worked with Dwayne Haskins for a few years in Washington. He also worked for a year in San Francisco when Colin Kaepernick was the quarterback. Brian Hoyer the next year. Jimmy Garoppolo, when he was traded from New England and was a young and upcoming quarterback in San Francisco. So while there are absolutely similarities with a lot of those quarterbacks that I just listed, there's a lot of different quarterbacks with a lot of different skill sets. And Kevin O'Connell has experienced how to get the best out of all of them. Kevin O'Connell, I think, is regarded as kind of a quarterback guru. So Kevin O'Connell, while he doesn't have an extensive resume of working with quarterbacks like Jayden Daniels, with the skill set of Jayden Daniels, and let's be honest, there's not a lot of quarterbacks with the skill set of Jayden Daniels. I think Kevin O'Connell is a good enough offensive mind and quarterback mind. Let's not forget he played the position. Like he was Tom Brady's backup for a while. He's enough of a quarterback mind to be able to unlock that in Jayden Daniels, I think. The biggest reason why, though, I think Jayden Daniels would be a great fit in Minnesota, and really any young quarterback would be in a great position in Minnesota, is because Minnesota has that infrastructure that I was just mentioning that Washington doesn't have as much of. Coming into Minnesota, he would have one of the best, if not the best receivers in the National Football League. Of course, we know him, we love him. It's Justin Jefferson. He would have TJ Hawkinson as his tight end. Minnesota has a pretty solid offensive line. I would say top 10, top 15 in the NFL this past season. And on the defensive side of the ball, Minnesota's defense wasn't really much to write home about, but it wasn't terrible. Like, it's not going to cost you 17 games. So I think Minnesota is a team that's constructed to win. And it was last season, but Kirk Cousins got hurt. And then they kind of went through the quarterback carousel and they were trying to find a more permanent solution at the quarterback position. You're not going to win very many games if you don't have a quarterback in place and if your $45 million quarterback gets injured. So I think that Minnesota has the infrastructure in place and has the coach in place for a young quarterback to be able to step in and not feel like he's running for his life on every single play because the offensive line sucks. Feels like he doesn't have to, wait in the pocket for 4 to 5 seconds if that offensive line even allows him to, because he doesn't have receivers that can get open, or a defense that stinks, or a head coach that's kind of a moron. You know what I mean? I think Minnesota is a stable place for a young quarterback. The third team, and I think that this one is probably the most intriguing one, and it's the Vegas Raiders. The Raiders sit with the 13th overall pick, but there is so much talk and conversation, and maybe it's smoke, maybe it's just rumors. But I think Vegas wants to trade up, and I think Vegas wants to get their quarterback, because the only quarterback that they have really as an option right now is Aiden O'Connell, and Aiden O'Connell ain't it. So the Raiders are obviously a quarterback needy team, but the kicker there is Antonio Pierce is the Raiders' new head coach. He was the interim at the end of last season after Josh McDaniels got fired and was officially named the full-time head coach this past offseason. Antonio Pierce was the defensive coordinator at Arizona State from 2019 to 2022. Who else was at Arizona State in that time period? You guessed it, Jayden Daniels. Jayden Daniels was at Arizona State from 2019 to 2021. Antonio Pierce knows Jayden Daniels. Jayden Daniels knows Antonio Pierce. And I know we're talking about quarterback and defensive coordinator, but I mean, are familiar with one another. Like, Antonio Pierce is in those meetings. He's in those game plans. He has those conversations. He's familiar with Jayden Daniels. He was on the coaching staff. So there's familiarity there. And it also kind of goes along the same lines with Cliff Kingsbury, as Cliff Kingsbury knows how to use a quarterback like Jayden Daniels. And I think Antonio Pierce knows that as well, because Jayden Daniels had a monstrous first season at Arizona State. To be fair, took some steps back in the next couple of years. I'm willing to say that was more about the turmoil that Arizona State was in, and rather than Jayden Daniels himself, proven by his past 2 seasons at LSU. But it's the familiarity there with the head coach, that's a really comfortable position for a young quarterback to be drafted into. And also, you have Davante Adams in Vegas. That I always say, a running back and a veteran receiver are a young quarterback's best friend. A running back that doesn't turn the football over, and it is a comfortable check down option for a young quarterback, and also a veteran receiver that can kind of, wrap his arm around the young quarterback and say, I got you. I got this. Just say, F it, Davante's down there, and I promise you I'm going to get it. So having a veteran receiver in Davante Adams to help a young quarterback along in Jayden Daniels, I think would be huge. Another point that I think we might make too much of, but honestly, frankly, I don't. I think it's important, and I think it absolutely is a factor. Washington, it's cold. Like, it gets cold in DC. They also play outside. Minnesota is a dome team. Vegas is also a dome team, and it's on the West Coast. It isn't cold in Vegas. Jayden Daniels is from California, and he has played football in Arizona in the Pac-12 and in Louisiana in the SEC. Jayden Daniels doesn't play in the cold. He's never played in the cold. He's from California. He's from Southern California at that. Weather matters when it comes to quarterbacks. It does. Like, I don't think that's something that, frankly, that we can overlook. I cover the Tennessee Titans in Nashville. Ryan Tannehill is from Texas. He played Miami and then came to Tennessee. And that was always a conversation of Ryan Tannehill with his teeny tiny hands and his inability to be able to handle the cold. He'd struggle in cold weather games. It's a thing. Like, it's a thing. And I don't know how Jayden Daniels, can handle the cold. Maybe it's a factor. Maybe it's not here. But it is something that I'm keeping in mind of a place that would be a best fit for Jayden Daniels. maybe it's not a cold weather outdoor team. Like Buffalo, I know they're not a quarterback needy team, but I'm just using an example of cold weather outdoor team, like not the best mix there for a California, Arizona, and Louisiana kid. But those are just my takes. And we all know that the draft is such an unpredictable little beast, that drafting is such an inexact science, that general managers make millions and millions of dollars to get these picks right, and they still don't. And they spend hours and hours and days and weeks and months preparing these things, and they still don't get it right. So these are just my takes, but I want to hear yours. I would love to hear kind of what you think about Jayden Daniels at the next level. I know a lot of Saints fans out there were hoping that he could potentially drop to 14. But coming up next, I've been having flashbacks as we talk about this draft, as we gear up for the draft going down here in the next few hours. I've been having flashbacks, and while it makes me happy, it also makes me sad at the same time. I'll explain coming up next after just a few words from our sponsors. All right, I want to tell you about FanDuel because it is such a fun time of the year. We've got NBA and NHL playoffs. We got baseball in full swing, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every single game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose, and you can bet on everything, slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that is safe, secure, and oh so easy to use. So if you're looking on something to or for something to put some money on the FanDuel Sportsbook app, I'm looking at Nathan McKinnon, anytime goal scorer. Nathan McKinnon, one of the best forwards in the National Hockey League for the Colorado Avalanche. He's always going to be a safe bet to find the net. But hey, that's just my take. Do it how you want to do it. Just do it with FanDuel. So what are you waiting for? Visit fanduel.com/locked on and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Okay, rolling along here on Locked on LSU. Got the NFL draft going down tonight, and it's going to be such a fun night. Seeing so many familiar faces, seeing so many LSU Tigers, Jayden Daniels, Malik Nabers, Brian Thomas Jr., and then as you go throughout the rest of the draft, Makai Wingo and Mason Smith and Jordan Jefferson, Charles Turner. It's going to be fun to see those guys as well. Day 2 and day 3 guys matter. But I was thinking about how leading up to this draft and talking about the draft and how so many people that I work with and in this industry have asked me for my breakdown of Jayden Daniels, Malik Nabers, and Brian Thomas Jr. It gave me flashbacks to the 2020 draft when it was the Joe Burrow year, the Justin Jefferson year, Patrick Queen, Caleb Chason, Christian Fulton, that whole 2019 national championship team. Essentially, I mean, it was like felt like every single one of them that was on the roster the year before was in the NFL draft. And I got flashbacks because I thought, wow, like what a testament to how great this team was if so many of these players are projected to be first round picks. And it gave me flashbacks to, and I think there are so many elements of this past season that were so reminiscent of 2019, of a second year transfer quarterback who had a solid first year, but, took leaps and bounds forward in year 2, won the Heisman Trophy, the best duo of receivers in all of college football, an electric offense, top offense in the country. So I think this whole season has almost been like a little bit of a God wink from that 2019 team. In the draft this year, and talking about these players, it brings back some of those feelings and brings back some of those feelings of this time in 2020. And we don't always want to think about April 2020, but the positive feelings of being so excited about seeing Joe Burrow being taken number 1 overall and seeing as many LSU Tigers being drafted in the first round as they were, and really just in the draft as a whole. But it also makes me a little bit sad because we talked about so many defensive players in that draft that went in the first and second rounds. Like I mentioned, Caleb Chason, Patrick Queen, Christian Fulton went in the second round. And I feel like that could have been the same this year had the defense just been a little bit better. That 2019 team, yeah, they're the number 1 offense in the country, just like this year. But what that 2019 team didn't have, or had, but this 2023 team didn't, was a good enough defense. Solid defense. it just continues to bring up frustration about this LSU defense this past year. That there are so many similarities, but the one glaring difference was the defense. And I think about Makai Wingo and Mason Smith, two players that I think are first round talent. First round talent that won't be first round draftees because they were on a defense that was absolutely horrid. Because they were being coached and coordinated by coaches and coordinators that frankly mismanaged them. So I know that you can't go back and undo it. I know that you can't go back and right the wrongs from Matt House and do a do-over. Like, wait, hold on, wait, can we do last year again, but maybe with a different coach? Like, I know you can't do that. So there's no sense in me continuing to just grovel in my frustration and think about what could have been, but I can't help myself this time of year when we're talking about how electrifying that LSU offense was. And you just couldn't pair it with a good enough defense. And it brings up the questions of, could this have been a national championship team? Could we have been talking about a second LSU national championship in the last 5 years? Would we be talking about Mason Smith as a first round draft pick or Makai Wingo as a first round draft pick had the defense just been a little bit better? The same way that we talked about Patrick Queen and Caleb Von Chason being first round talent. I know it's not all the same. Like, I know that there's certain immeasurables and I know there's certain things that you just can't recreate. You can't just copy and paste it. But it is kind of spooky, a little bit eerie, how similar this past year was, except for that one glaring, rather important thing. And it's frustrating. It's going to be one of those things, and you might tell me get over it, and I get it. But it's going to be one of those sports what ifs that just lingers over my head for the foreseeable future and probably for the rest of my life. It's going to torture me. But it's going to be a great weekend and a great day. Excited for the NFL draft. Enjoy it tonight. I hope there is mayhem. I hope there is drama. And I hope that everybody's teams picks their next franchise player for the next 10 to 15 years. May the odds be ever in your favor. That's going to do it for me today. Thank you for making Locked On LSU your first listen every single day. Coming up next, we'll get back into a full transfer portal and recruiting breakdown. The latest that I'm hearing on some names that have entered the transfer portal. Is LSU involved? Should LSU be involved? We'll get into that coming up on tomorrow's edition of Locked On LSU.